Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another Ogre tutorial for bells. My name is Dominique Moreau. I'm a percussionist in Ottawa as well as a ringer with St. Andrew's Ringers. And today we're talking about malleting. And before I start, I do want to mention a workshop that Rob Cairns of Ogre has done already on malleting. He did it in September and it's available through the Ogre website as well as on his personal website. The first thing I want to talk about is how to hold the mallets. There's a specific way that will help you play better, maybe not better, but it'll make it easier for you to play without working as hard. The mallet in itself is a lever and it helps multiply the force you're doing so you don't have to work as hard. So you don't want to hold it too close to the head of the mallet. Then you have no range of motion. The motion of my wrist is basically the motion of the mallet. But if I hold the mallet closer to the end, a small motion of my wrist will create a very big motion with the head. So you don't need to move very much to do a lot of sound with a mallet. The best way to hold a mallet is usually you'll grip it with two fingers, your thumb and your index finger, and then the other fingers just curl loosely around the stick. There should be some give. The stick should be able to move just a little bit without moving that grip. It shouldn't be super tight. And the first joint of your index finger is where you'll put the mallet, and the thumb will just go across. And those two fingers basically hold the mallet, and the other fingers just loosely around. The next thing I want to talk about is how to move the mallet. So once you've got the mallet and you're gripping it correctly, both hands, the motion shouldn't start on the bell. If you've got a bell, your motion shouldn't start on the bell. It should start above the bell. So the motion starts when the mallet is ready to go down and then goes all the way back up. If I do this just in my hand, this is a stick that's ready, goes down and right away goes up. I'm not lingering on the bell. You don't want to stay on the bell. That would do what we call a dead stroke in percussion. And just to hear the difference, here's a normal stroke. There's a bit of ring to the bell. If I do a dead stroke, the note is very, very short, and that's not usually what you want. As well, it actually can damage the bell. It's hard to damage a bell with a soft mallet, but dead strokes are not great for bells. You'll only use them when the music specifically asks for something like that, and it's not very common in handbell music. So the motion of down up that you will use, it takes a while to get used to be ready all the time. So when you're malleting, don't put the mallets on the bells when you're waiting to play. Your mallets should be ready above, and the stick height matters. If you're going to play soft, don't have your mallets super high. They'll be low. You'll play soft. If they're higher, you'll play louder. So the stick height is equal to your dynamic. If you're playing soft, you don't need much stick height. And you'll notice that all of the motion I'm doing comes from my wrist. My arm is not going up and down. And there's a reason for that. The mallet, as I said earlier, is a lever. It's already multiplying the force I'm using. I don't need the strength of my entire arm to play loud. The stick will do it on its own with just a basic wrist motion. So, and that will make it easier for you to hit the right bell. You don't want to hit by mistake a wrong bell because you couldn't aim because your mallet was not anymore in your vision, in your peripheral vision. If it's here, I don't see it. So if you stay close, and even closer for soft, be much easier. A great way to practice the proper motion is to practice in front of a mirror. Now you might not have bells at home, and that's fine. You don't need the bells to practice, especially not just practicing the motion. You can hit anything. I think Rob used books in his workshop. You can use, if you have access to a proper practice pad, that's great, that drummers use, but you can use anything, and your mallets don't need to be mallets. You can practice with wooden spoons to practice the grip. You can just use a pencil. It's roughly the same thickness as a mallet handle. you could even do that. It's not the same length. The wooden spoon might be closer if you're trying to actually practice the motion. But practicing in front of a mirror, you'll notice right away the stick height you're using and the motions you're using. If you see yourself do something like this, or do dead motions. Sometimes only one of your hands will do dead motions. I'm trying to do it right now. I've trained myself not to do it, but my left hand at the moment is not lifting the way my right hand is. So that is something you want to fix and have the two hands do similar motions that go down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. So when you're malleting a bell, you want to mallet on a specific place on the bell. You don't want to just hit anywhere on the casting. Of course, you'll get a sound anywhere, but the bow of the bell, which is the arc on the side, I'll use my mallet to point. It'll be easier to see against my gray shirt. So the bow of the bell, the curved part, has different thicknesses. The very edge, the lip of the bell, is very thin, and you don't want to hit there. First of all, you're more likely to damage the bell, but also you're more likely to get a thinner, smaller sound. The best part is actually exactly where the clapper hits, which is about of the middle of the curve there. If you're not sure, look inside where there's probably a spot where the clapper hits. If it's Schulmerich, it's probably slightly darker than the rest of the casting on the inside, and that tells you roughly where you should be hitting on the outside. That's the good spot. If I hit the lip, it's a very thin sound. Same thing if I hit the base of the casting. It's not a full sound like you get from hitting that spot. So you want to try hitting that spot when you're malleting, and you'll get a much nicer, fuller sound. On the smaller bell, it's quite harder to hit the right spot, but the mallets are usually also smaller, and the smaller the bell, the smaller the motion probably. It'll help you. Small motions will help you hit exactly where you need, and because the tiny bells usually play with quite hard mallets, you'll have a lot of sound regardless. You don't need a big motion on a small bell. I talked about stick height for dynamics. There's another instance where we'll use stick height. Sometimes the composer will ask us to do accents while malleting. And usually the way we do this is by keeping a fairly low stick height and adding stick height for the note that has an accent. So on the screen right now you can see a little exercise where you go right, left for sticking. You don't change anything about the sticking, but the accent will move. So it'll sound something like this. So this exercise is a good basic exercise to practice changing the stick height. Once you get comfortable with the motions, time to get comfortable with accents. And this is not an exercise that needs very long to practice. Doing it every now and then is a good way of getting the motions correct. And if it becomes second nature, if it's become muscle memory, then it'll be much easier when you see it in actual pieces. And if you want to practice more, then you can change, if you've got bells, you can do the same accent pattern, changing bells for each note. You can always change an exercise to fit what you need to practice. So if you have a pattern that has accents while moving bells, make an exercise that does that. You can always create exercise and pick one that exists and transfer it to what you need. In this case, the same exercise with multiple bells. Arguably the hardest part about malleting is to remember to use both of your mallets. This is probably the mistake I see the most often with handbell players is, oh, well, I need one bell to be malleted. I'll pick up one mallet and it gets quite hard at some point to play everything with one hand. Playing really fast is quite hard. If I use both my hands, each hand is playing half as fast. And I'm lazy, so I like I like the solutions that are lazier. So I will split between two mallets as much as possible. Of course, it's not always possible. Some position, if you're playing, for example, B4, C5, you're likely to have to play a bell with one hand and mallet with the other. That's possible. That happens in some positions. Bass bells do get things like that quite often, and yeah, the position that has middle C, or any position that's goes between battery and the high bells, sometimes will be quite difficult because you might need to do something different with both of your hands. But usually, if you're malleting, both of your hands can be holding mallets, even if it's just one bell. If you've got nothing else to do with the other hand, pick a mallet and then you can split the work between your mallets. Teamwork. Your hands can work as a team as well. And you can use that to your advantage, because fast stuff, again, fast things, hard to play with one mallet. If you're moving quickly, if you've got accents, you can keep all the accented notes on one hand and the non-accented notes on the other hand, for example. There's options. And this is the key part about stickings, is to figure them out. Sometimes alternating is usually a good option. Sometimes you'll keep one mallet to one bell. Not always. Try to find a sticking that works. Don't just assume that the left mallet goes on the left bell and the right mallet goes on the right bell. This often leads to hands that don't work as much and hands that are being overworked. And we all know how painful tendonitis can be, so you want to avoid it. So be lazy. Have both of your hands work equally. And plan your stickings. If you've got something that's difficult to remember which hand plays where, because for example, you have a bunch of bells, write down some stickings. There's multiple systems to write down stickings. There's a few that are appearing on the screen at the moment. One of them is just R and L for right and left. And you don't need to write it under every single note, just the notes that you need to remember, for example, especially if you're going to do two right hands in a row. Another system is the dot and circle, I like to call, is my personal favorite. It's used a lot by French percussionists and a number of bilingual percussionists in Canada as well. And the last one is a dot and a line. The dot is for the right hand, which is a bit confusing with the dot and circle, where the dot is the left. That system is used a lot in Eastern Europe. Regardless, whichever works for you is perfectly valid. If you're French, you can use D and G for droite and gauche. If you're used to piano music, you might do D and S, because that's what they use in Italian. Whichever works. But do mark your stickings. Do plan ahead. This is especially important for bass bells, where sometimes you've got 7 or 8 bells that you're malleting, and they're wide. The spacing is wide. What I have here with 5 bells would take twice the space if I was playing the buckets. So mark down, because if you're moving here and you need to go over there, you don't want to have to cross your hands. That's completely really hard to do. Don't do that. So you want to plan your sticking so that you can easily reach the bells you need to reach, and not do things that will create positionings that can then lead to problems. If you do that one hand and then you've got to play another bell with the right, your hands are already crossed and you don't know what to do. So plan your sticking, write it down, and you might need to practice. Sometimes just practicing the stickings. If you don't have the bells, you can just use books do work. Put stickers on the table, 3 pillows. There's many options just to practice going from bell to bell. I mentioned already how 2 mallets can be more useful. One thing that sometimes you'll have to do is roll on the bell with 2 mallets, and you don't really have a choice to use 2 mallets to roll. Usually when you have a roll, it's notated the way you can see on the screen right now. And it's just a quick alternation between 2 hands. Sometimes we're not used to alternate our hands, so it might take a little practice. You might want to do that slowly and then speed it up. And you'll notice as I get faster that the stick height gets lower. If I try to play fast with a big stick height, it's really hard. And it's a lot of energy that you're using, not very useful. I hope this workshop was helpful for you. I'm looking forward to see you in the Q&A and answer your questions. If you have any questions after the Q&A, my email address has been on the bottom of the screen, and feel free to email me and ask questions. See you soon.